It was the day I came back to the United States, after 12 long years away. My first stop, straight from the airport, was a high-rise tower in the heart of the city, the address where my son was living. The main entrance had a secure lock. I buzzed the apartment number. A moment later, the intercom crackled to life. "Yes, who is it?" a woman's voice asked. "It's me," I said, my own voice feeling foreign in my throat. "It's Michael's mother." A long silence stretched out, so long I thought the connection had been cut. Then, with a click, the door buzzed open. When the apartment door itself opened, it was a young woman who stood before me, my son's wife. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe for a brief moment before she spoke. "Oh, we were expecting you." I managed a small, tired smile. "I hope I haven't startled you. It's been 12 years. I was so anxious to see his face, even for just a minute." She led me into the living room, and I perched on the very edge of a sleek, modern sofa. My son, Michael, was apparently still at work. He was nowhere to be seen. The apartment was quiet, cold, and far too tidy. There were no family photos on the walls, no children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Nothing that spoke of a life lived with warmth and joy. After a few minutes, she returned from another room holding a simple paper envelope. She held it out to me. What is this?" I asked. "It's the passbook for the old joint savings account," she said. "Your name is still on it, and the paperwork to remove it is just such a hassle." My breath caught. I took the passbook from her, my fingers trembling slightly. It was the account I had used for 12 years to send money to Michael while he was studying in England. Every month I had scrimped and saved, sending what I could to support him. My name was on it as a joint owner, a symbol of our connection. "My name, yes, it's still on here, isn't it?" I murmured, looking at the familiar script. Her eyes narrowed for a split second. And then, she did something so unbelievable, my mind couldn't process it. She snatched the passbook from my hand, turned, and walked briskly into the kitchen. She placed it directly on the grate of the gas stove. With a click, a blue flame ignited, and the corner of the passbook began to curl and blacken. I tried to stand up, to shout, but no words would come out. My body felt frozen. "In our family," she said, her voice flat and cold, "my mother is the one who helps us. Let me be perfectly honest with you. You're not part of this family anymore." Not part of the family? After all those years? To pay for my son's education, I had sold our family home. I had moved into a rundown apartment to live by myself. I spent every Christmas, every New Year's Day, completely alone, holding on to a single belief that one day my son would return and a warm, loving family would be waiting for me. "From now on, my mother will be handling everything," she continued, not even glancing at the small fire she had started. "Your time is over." The passbook was turning to ash. It wasn't just paper. It was my 12 years of hope, of sacrifice, of prayer. I was watching my life's devotion burn away right in front of my eyes. Just then, the front door opened, and my son, Michael, walked in. I turned, my heart leaping with a desperate hope, trying to catch his eye. But he looked away. He deliberately avoided my gaze. And then he spoke, his voice tense. "Mom, you can't just show up like this. This isn't good." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Was I dreaming? This had to be a nightmare. For 12 years, who had I been working so hard for? What had my family even been? I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. All I could do was stand there, rooted to the spot. In that single, devastating moment, I became a ghost in that home, a person who did not exist. My name is Evelyn Reed. I am 72 years old. For most of my life, I was a middle school teacher in Cleveland, Ohio. Even now, I sometimes dream of those days, of standing before a blackboard, the scent of chalk dust in the air, the joy of calling on a student, of looking them in the eye and talking about their future. That was what gave my life meaning. It was my purpose. But life has a way of testing us in ways we can never anticipate. My husband passed away when our son Michael was just 10 years old. It was late spring, a time when his school backpack still had that new, leathery smell. It was an accident. A car crash on his way to work one morning, and just like that, he never came home again. I never remarried. I couldn't imagine it. I wanted to raise Michael on my own strength, rather than rely on someone else. I felt that my husband's spirit, his hopes for our son, were living on inside of me. I had to honor that. So, I taught at the school during the day, and at night, I took a part-time job tutoring students privately. I survived on 3, maybe 4 hours of sleep, but none of that mattered. When Michael would come home and smile, telling me, "Mom, lunch was great today," all the exhaustion would simply melt away. Michael was an exceptionally bright child. Throughout middle school and high school, he was always at the top of his class. I believed with every fiber of my being, this boy is going to fly. He's going to go so far. The year he was applying to colleges, he came to me with a sudden announcement. "Mom," he said, "I want to go to England." I was stunned, but I didn't try to stop him. In fact, I was immensely proud that he had such a big dream. And then, like a miracle, he won a scholarship and was accepted into a prestigious university in London. That was when I made my decision. I decided to sell the house my husband and I had lived in together, that 3-bedroom clapboard house on a quiet, tree-lined street. That house was filled with a lifetime of memories. The spot on the floor where Michael took his first steps. The worn armchair where I'd sat all night, holding him when he had a high fever. The dining room where the 3 of us celebrated my husband's last birthday. But for the sake of the future, I let go of the past. I used a portion of the money from the sale to cover Michael's initial living expenses, and the rest I deposited into a new joint savings account, under both my name and his. I didn't care what happened to me. I just didn't want Michael to ever have to struggle or go without. From that day forward, I lived in a tiny, rented studio apartment, a single room, not even 100 square feet. When I unfolded my bed at night, there was barely any room left to walk. But I never once complained. Every 3 months, I would go to the bank and wire money to him. He never asked for it, but he would always send a short email back. "Thanks, Mom." I printed out every single one of those emails and taped them into a notebook. Each word was a lifeline, the fuel that kept me going. I lived like that for 10 years. Eventually, Michael graduated, found a good job there in London, and a little while later, sent a letter saying he had married an American woman he'd met. "We'll have a proper wedding in the States when things settle down," he wrote. I held on to that promise, looking forward to it with all my heart, and it gave me the strength to keep going. I truly believed the day was coming when all my sacrifices would be rewarded. The day when my son would be home with his new family, and I would once again be a part of that family, sitting around a dinner table, smiling together. In the 12 years since Michael left for England, we had only spent the holidays together twice. Just twice. "Work is just so crazy. I'm sorry, Mom." "Maybe next year." It was the same excuse every year. Sometimes it felt like, with the time difference and the thousands of miles of ocean between us, my voice couldn't quite reach him. When I'd call and ask, "How are you doing?" the reply was always a clipped, "Yeah, I'm fine." If I tried to share a bit of my own life, saying something like, "It's starting to get cold here," he'd cut me off. "Look, I've got to run. I'll call you back." And the line would go dead. After each of those brief, unsatisfying calls, I would be left alone in the silence. I'd turn off the television, sit huddled under a quilt on my old sofa, and just close my eyes. The steam rising from my solitary bowl of soup on New Year's Day felt so empty. I told myself the same thing, over and over again. He's an adult now. Being busy is a good thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that hiding in the shadow of that busyness was a quiet, creeping loneliness. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't needed anymore. The hope I felt on the day I waved goodbye to him at the airport, that bright, shining hope, had been slowly, quietly fading with each passing year. And that is why I began preparing for a journey of my own, with the hope of finally seeing my son again, For the first time in 12 years, more than a decade had passed in quiet solitude since Michael left for his studies in London. It was only last year that I heard a rumor, through a friend, that he had returned to the States. But I never received a call, not a single word from him. Then one day, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered it hesitantly. A man's voice I didn't recognize spoke. "Ma'am, is this Mrs. Reed? Evelyn Reed? You probably don't know me, but it seems your son has gotten himself into a bit of trouble." My chest tightened into a cold, hard knot. Trouble? What kind of trouble? I don't have all the details, the man said. But from what I hear, ever since he came back from overseas, he's been living with a certain woman, and it sounds like she's been taking him for a ride, financially speaking. The world went white for a moment. My head felt light. I see, I managed to say. Please, if you hear anything else, could you let me know? After I hung up, the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. Taking him for a ride? The phrase echoed in my mind, a sickening refrain. The next day, I called my son. "Michael, it's been a while. I need to talk to you about something." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained. "Sorry, Mom, I'm really tied up right now. I'll call you back later." Late. And then he was gone. That night, sleep wouldn't come. My eyes fell on a small box on my desk, and I saw an old holiday card I'd saved from his time in London. To Mom. "Hope you're doing well. We'll see each other when I get back." The hope I had clung to for so long felt like it was slipping even further from my grasp. A few days later, a text message came from Susan, an old friend from my Cleveland days. "Evelyn, did you hear? I heard Michael has been living with someone in the city for over a year now. The rumor is, she used to be a bartender at one of those rough places downtown. People said she was a dangerous type. I hope he's okay." As I read the message, a hot pressure built behind my eyes. A bartender from a rough place? Those few words sent a chill straight through me. That evening, I sank onto my sofa and whispered into the empty room. If that's true, what kind of life is he planning to live? A mother can't tell her son what path to choose, but I can't help it. I'm just so worried. Several more weeks passed. I tried calling my son again, but the response was the same. "Mom, not again. I'm sorry, I'm just so busy. I've got a deadline, I have to go." At some point, the word busy had become a code between us, a wall he put up to keep me out. But something else was gnawing at me, a deeper, more painful question. Why didn't he ever come to visit his father's grave? Why didn't he show up for Mother's Day, or even for my birthday? And worse, I realized I had started to accept this as normal. What is a family? What does it mean to be a mother? The questions had taken root deep inside my heart and refused to go away. I made up my mind. Phone calls are not enough. If I don't go myself, I'll never know the truth. With that firm resolve, I packed a small overnight bag so I would be ready to leave at a moment's notice. I had to go, because I needed to know the truth, and I wanted to ask them, face to face, what a real family was supposed to be. Walking down the dark street that night, I murmured to myself, "Michael, all I want is to hear you say that you're glad I'm here, that having your mother around makes you feel safe." The question sank, deep and silent, into the hollow space in my chest. And before I knew it, I was online, booking a flight. I stood before the gleaming facade of my son's apartment building. When I pressed the button on the intercom, a young woman's voice answered. "Oh, who is it?" For a second, I couldn't breathe. "It's Michael Reed's mother. My name is Evelyn." After a pause, a buzzer sounded, and the door clicked open. A young woman opened the apartment door and looked me up and down, her expression souring. "Oh, right. You're from Michael's old family? Old family?" The words didn't make sense. I just stood there, confused. Just then, my son Michael appeared from a back room. The moment our eyes met, I felt a chill run through me. His gaze was cold, sharp, and unforgiving. "Mom, why are you here? You can't just show up without calling. Stop with the melodrama." "Uh, I, I, I haven't heard from you, I answered, my voice trembling. I just wanted to see your face. I was led into the living room, but it didn't feel like any home I had ever known. The small memorial shelf I had given them with the pictures of my late husband was gone. In its place was sleek, impersonal, modern furniture. A white shag rug covered the floor, and on the walls hung photos of a family I did not recognize. "Where is the memorial shelf for your father?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman, his wife, laughed. A short, sharp sound. "We got rid of that old thing," she said. "It was so dated. It just didn't fit our style." I heard something break deep inside my chest. My hands shaking, I reached into my purse and took out the passbook I had so carefully carried with me. This is the money I saved and sent to you every month while you were studying. There's still some left. What are you going to do with it?" Michael didn't even glance at it. His voice was like ice. "Your name is on that account too, right, Mom? So why don't you just take your share and go home?" "And your share?" I asked, my heart sinking. He scoffed. "Her mother is going through a tough time right now. Nursing care, other expenses, she could use the help. I want to make things easier for her." At that very moment, his wife reached over, snatched the passbook out of my hands, and stormed into the kitchen, throwing it onto the gas stove. "We don't need this, do we? Why would we want money from someone who isn't family?" I couldn't even scream. My legs gave out, and I crumpled to the floor. My long-held dream of a family reunion had just turned to ash. I remember, years ago, an old friend told me, "Evelyn, you should really put that savings account in your name only. You never know what can happen these days." I had laughed at the time. "No, that would defeat the whole purpose," I'd said. "If a mother and son can't trust each other, then you can't really call it a family, can you?" It was true, the account was in both our names. But in my heart, I had already signed my half over to him 1,000 times. That passbook represented every paycheck I had ever earned, a little piece of it set aside, month after month. It was the food I didn't eat, the clothes I didn't buy, all of it saved for his future. But on that day, that passbook was consumed by flames on a gas stove. And I think, in that moment, my heart burned up right along with it. The word trust can be a beautiful thing, but sometimes it can be a foolish one. I wanted to trust. I wanted to believe in my son, in the future, in the sacred bond of family. But that was the day I finally learned a terrible lesson, that sometimes, to believe so completely, you must be prepared to lose absolutely everything. "We got rid of that old thing," she had said, and her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. Then she had snatched the passbook from my hands, a cold smile playing on her lips as she walked to the kitchen and threw it carelessly onto the stove. "We don't need your share anymore," she'd said. After a moment of silence, the gas ignited, and I watched the corner of the passbook disappear into the flame. The pages turned black and brittle. The ink of the transaction logs bled and vanished, and with a series of soft crackles, 12 years of my love and sacrifice turned into nothing but ash. I stood there, paralyzed, unable to move. As a teacher, I had spent my entire career telling my students about the virtue of trust, the importance of faith in others. And now, even that belief was now forced to learn that the trust I held as a mother could be shattered so easily, so completely. Just then, Michael peeked out from the back room, his voice calm and detached. "Mom, please go home. It's all over now." My heart felt like it had frozen solid in my chest, and I couldn't draw a breath. In that instant, I understood that everything I had believed in, right up until that very moment, was nothing more than the past to him. The past? I was speechless. The life I had built as a mother, as a wife, and as a teacher, all of it was being dismissed as the past in the blink of an eye. Before I left the room, I found my eyes drawn to her perfectly made-up face, her neatly shaped eyebrows, the thin line of lipstick on her lips. That smile of hers seemed designed to erase my very existence from the room. "There's no place for me here as a mother," I whispered to myself in the silence of my own heart. That was the only thought I could form as I pushed open the locked door of the apartment. The moment I stepped outside the building, a light rain began to fall. It was gentle, yet so cold. I didn't have an umbrella, but I decided to walk anyway. The dark spots spreading across the concrete seemed to mirror the state of my own heart. With every step on the pavement, a chill crept up from the soles of my feet. A neighbor who saw me called out, her voice full of surprise, but I could only manage a small dip of my head. "I'm fine, it's nothing." But the truth was, the deepest parts of my soul were being torn to shreds by an agony I couldn't name. Every time a raindrop touched my hair, I saw it superimposed over memories of days long gone. Those bright days, standing proud in front of my classroom. The moment I first held Michael and whispered his name, the simple joy of a Christmas spent together as a family, all of it now felt like a distant, faded dream. Only one thing remained, etched into my heart. "Mom, please go home." In that one short sentence, my pride as a mother, the years I had spent believing, had all been stolen away. The moment the front door clicked shut behind me, I found that I couldn't move. A part of my heart, no, almost all of it, was desperately hoping that someone would open the door again, that a voice would call out, "Wait!" A cold wind brushed against my cheek, but I remained standing there, motionless. At my feet, only my own shadow stretched out silently on the damp ground. The sound of cars passing on the street, the faint cry of a bird somewhere in the distance. Besides those things, there was no sound at all. I just stood there and waited. The Michael I used to know would never have done this. The little boy who, sick with a fever one night, had clutched my hand and cried, "Mommy, stay with me." The sound of his voice after his high school graduation, choked with tears as he promised, "I'll make you proud, Mom. I'll pay you back for everything." But the door did not open. No footsteps approached from behind me. Still, I continued to stand there in front of that door. 3 minutes, maybe 5. My sense of time had become a blur. But finally, I understood. This silence was the answer. "You don't belong here anymore." It felt as if the wind itself had whispered those words to me. A dull ache spread through my chest, and the cold air made my eyes sting. I gave a deep, formal bow to the closed door, and then I forced my trembling legs to move. It was the moment that my hope, the very essence of my motherhood, quietly crumbled into dust. I began to walk slowly down the street in front of his building. My hands were empty. All that remained in my heart was a single, hollow feeling emptiness. Just then, an elderly man started walking toward me from the opposite direction. When I lifted my head, I recognized his profile. He was an old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who used to play chess with my husband on our porch on warm summer evenings. It seemed he recognized me, too. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, and I saw his expression flicker. Instinctively, I lowered my head in a small nod of greeting. "Eh?" He said nothing. He simply looked at my face, then immediately averted his gaze, gave a curt, silent nod, and walked right past me. As if nothing had happened. As if I wasn't even there. I stopped and glanced back over my shoulder. His retreating back told me nothing. Maybe this is just what society is like. When people see the pain of an older person, they look away. They might feel a flicker of sympathy, but they don't want to get involved. I suppose, a long time ago, I might have been the same way. And that's why this silence, this invisibility, felt so heavy in my chest right now. I finally came to a stop at the bus stop for my ride home. I set down my purse and tilted my face up to the rain. When I took a deep breath, the coldness of the rain filled my lungs, and with every exhale, my tears mixed with the downpour and fell to the ground. I remember standing before my father's and my husband's graves. "Please, watch over Michael," I had prayed. And holding my husband's last words in my heart, I had done everything I possibly could. But today, I felt as if I had been abandoned by my own family. No, it wasn't the family that had abandoned me. It was my dream of what it meant to be a mother. As I stepped onto the bus, I made a quiet decision. This is all right. I'm going to be all right. Even if that passbook had turned to ash, my life wasn't over. But in that moment, for the very first time, I truly felt that my role as a mother had come to an end. "We got rid of that old thing," she had said, and her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. Then she had snatched the passbook from my hands, a cold smile playing on her lips as she walked to the kitchen and threw it carelessly onto the stove. "We don't need your share anymore," she'd said. After a moment of silence, the gas ignited, and I watched the corner of the passbook disappear into the flame. The pages turned black and brittle, the ink of the transaction logs bled and vanished, and with a series of soft crackles, 12 years of my love and sacrifice turned into nothing but ash. I stood there, paralyzed, unable to move. As a teacher, I had spent my entire career telling my students about the virtue of trust, the importance of faith in others. And now, I was now forced to learn that the trust I held as a mother could be shattered so easily, so completely. Just then, Michael peeked out from the back room, his voice calm and detached. "Mom, please go home. It's all over now." My heart felt like it had frozen solid in my chest, and I couldn't draw a breath. In that instant, I understood that everything I had believed in, right up until that very moment, was nothing more than the past to him. The past? I was speechless. The life I had built as a mother, as a wife, and as a teacher, all of it was being dismissed as the past in the blink of an eye. Before I left the room, I found my eyes drawn to her perfectly made-up face. Her neatly shaped eyebrows, the thin line of lipstick on her lips, that smile of hers seemed designed to erase my very existence from the room. "There's no place for me here as a mother," I whispered to myself in the silence of my own heart. That was the only thought I could form as I pushed open the locked door of the apartment. The moment I stepped outside the building, a light rain began to fall. It was gentle, yet so cold. I didn't have an umbrella, but I decided to walk anyway. The dark spots spreading across the concrete seemed to mirror the state of my own heart. With every step on the pavement, a chill crept up from the soles of my feet. A neighbor who saw me called out, her voice full of surprise. But I could only manage a small dip of my head. "I'm fine. It's nothing." But the truth was, the deepest parts of my soul were being torn to shreds by an agony I couldn't name. Every time a raindrop touched my hair, I saw it superimposed over memories of days long gone. Those bright days, standing proud in front of my classroom. The moment I first held Michael and whispered his name. The simple joy of a Christmas spent together as a family. All of it now felt like a distant, faded dream. Only one thing remained, etched into my heart. "Mom, please go home." In that one short sentence, my pride as a mother, the years I had spent believing, had all been stolen away. The moment the front door clicked shut behind me, I found that I couldn't move. A part of my heart, no, almost all of it, was desperately hoping that someone would open the door again. That a voice would call out, "Wait!" A cold wind brushed against my cheek, but I remained standing there, motionless. At my feet, only my own shadow stretched out silently on the damp ground. The sound of cars passing on the street, the faint cry of a bird somewhere in the distance. Besides those things, there was no sound at all. I just stood there and waited. The Michael I used to know would never have done this. The little boy who, sick with a fever one night, had clutched my hand and cried, "Mommy, stay with me." The sound of his voice after his high school graduation, choked with tears as he promised, "I'll make you proud, Mom. I'll pay you back for everything." But the door did not open. No footsteps approached from behind me. Still, I continued to stand there in front of that door. 3 minutes, maybe 5, my sense of time had become a blur. But finally, I understood. This silence was the answer. "You don't belong here anymore." It felt as if the wind itself had whispered those words to me. A dull ache spread through my chest, and the cold air made my eyes sting. I gave a deep, formal bow to the closed door, and then I forced my trembling legs to move. It was the moment that my hope, the very essence of my motherhood, quietly crumbled into dust. I began to walk slowly down the street in front of his building. My hands were empty. All that remained in my heart was a single, hollow feeling emptiness. Just then, An elderly man started walking toward me from the opposite direction. When I lifted my head, I recognized his profile. He was an old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who used to play chess with my husband on our porch on warm summer evenings. It seemed he recognized me, too. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, and I saw his expression flicker. Instinctively, I lowered my head in a small nod of greeting. "Good?" He said nothing. He simply looked at my face, then immediately averted his gaze, gave a curt, silent nod, and walked right past me. As if nothing had happened. As if I wasn't even there. I stopped and glanced back over my shoulder. His retreating back told me nothing. Maybe this is just what society is like. When people see the pain of an older person, they look away. They might feel a flicker of sympathy, but they don't want to get involved. I suppose, a long time ago, I might have been the same way. And that's why this silence, this invisibility, felt so heavy in my chest right now. I finally came to a stop at the bus stop for my ride home. I set down my purse and tilted my face up to the rain. When I took a deep breath, the coldness of the rain filled my lungs, and with every exhale my tears mixed with the downpour and fell to the ground. I remember standing before my father's and my husband's graves. "Please, watch over Michael," I had prayed. And holding my husband's last words in my heart, I had done everything I possibly could. But today, I felt as if I had been abandoned by my own family. No, it wasn't the family that had abandoned me, it was my dream of what it meant to be a mother. As I stepped onto the bus, I made a quiet decision. This is all right. I'm going to be all right. Even if that passbook had turned to ash, my life wasn't over. But in that moment, for the very first time, I truly felt that my role as a mother had come to an end. On the way home, I walked slowly, replaying the day's events in my head, one by one. The moment my son looked at me and turned away without a word. The young woman standing beside him, her eyes cold as ice. And the passbook, burning. Where did I go wrong? He was always such a gentle boy. I remember the night his father died, how he cried himself to sleep clutching my hand. I remember the smile on his face when he came home from school with a 4-leaf clover he'd found, telling me, "This is a lucky charm for you, Mom." Where did all that kindness go? But then, a thought occurred to me. Perhaps he was just tired of living for someone else. Even with his scholarship, he must have felt the weight of those 12 years. The feeling that he was living on my money. I thought I was encouraging him, but maybe to him, my support felt like a burden. And that woman, she must have been someone who had struggled with poverty and instability her whole life. That must be why she saw my presence as a threat to her newfound security and possessions. To protect the stability she had now, she had to cut away the past. Maybe that was the form of happiness that she and my son had chosen together. But all I ever wanted was for us to be a family, to sit around the same dinner table, talking about the changing seasons, laughing about future grandchildren, those simple, everyday things. But that was my dream, not their reality. And today, I finally understood that. A few tears escaped, but strangely, my heart felt calm. The wind caressed my cheek, and I could see a small patch of blue sky breaking through the clouds. I just kept walking, looking straight ahead, not to cling to the past, but to build a new place for myself, on my own. I remembered something then, something that had seemed insignificant before. She, that young woman, had always been someone with blurry boundaries. From the very first time I heard her voice on the phone, something about it felt rehearsed. Her tone was polite, saying things like, "Oh, Mother, read, please don't overdo it." But I always felt a strong emotional distance. I heard later that she'd had a difficult childhood, raised by her grandmother while her mother worked nights. Perhaps she had no memories of what a family was supposed to feel like, stable, warm, and safe. Maybe that's why she clung to Michael so tightly. Maybe the only way she knew how to love was to possess, where sharing everything meant making it hers alone. And Michael, for his part, had probably spent all those years studying abroad with the heavy thought that he had to do it all for his family. The money I sent, the letters of encouragement, I meant them as expressions of love. But to him, They might have felt like expectations, like obligations. And then, he met someone like her. Someone who told him, "You're perfect just the way you are." It's no wonder his heart would be drawn to that. And so, under her influence, he was conditioned to believe that parent equals past, and independence equals cutting ties, until, somewhere along the way, he came to believe that a life without me was the only peaceful one. It wasn't that anyone was a bad person, it was just that the methods we each chose to protect ourselves had led us to this. It was only that it had taken a form that hurt someone. That day, I said nothing. I just left that house behind. It was so quiet. The sound of the gas flame, his words, "Mom, please go home," lingered in my heart, but I turned my back with my lips sealed. On the way home, it felt as if I were carrying a heavy stone in my chest. It wasn't a downpour, just a fine, misty rain that dampened my cheeks. Each tiny droplet seemed to merge with my memories, piercing my heart one needle stitch at a time. I just kept walking, numbly, all the way to the bus station platform. When I got back, my apartment was just as it had always been. A single room in a small, old building. On the table sat a single mug, the one I had used for so many years. Every day, the words I wrote were the same. "I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Could you let me see your face, just once?" But there was never a reply. Still, I kept writing. Because, if I were being honest with myself, it was because I wanted to hear his voice, because I wanted to see his face. At night, my friend would call after she got home from work. "How are you holding up? You're not crying, are you?" she would ask. Her voice filled with concern. I would only answer, "I'm all right." But I think my voice must have trembled a few times. It was about a week later. In my mailbox, there was an envelope with no return address. It was small and thin, an envelope that felt gentle just to hold. I went back inside, sat down in my living room chair, and opened it. Inside was an ultrasound photograph. A tiny, round life, still so small, was pictured there. And beneath it, there were words. Just a few. "I'm sorry. You're going to be a grandmother soon." That was all it said. No name, no clue as to who sent it, nothing else. The moment I saw the photograph, a warmth spread through my chest, and tears began to stream down my face. It wasn't regret, and it wasn't anger. It was a strangely quiet, warm feeling. Even if there was no name, there was now a person in this world who would call me Grandma, and I felt that was more than enough. In that instant, it felt as if the money I had sent for 12 years, the hopes I had held on to for so long, and the love I had for them, all of it was finally being repaid. It was the night I received that letter. Just a single ultrasound picture, with no sender's name written on it. The moment that tiny life quietly appeared before my eyes, I felt something that had been pulled taut deep inside my chest, finally, gently, release. "You're going to be a grandmother," I felt a voice whisper to me. And with that, I went to the back of my closet and pulled out a certain box. It was a bundle of the many letters I had written to Michael over the years. From the day he left for London, I had written to him a few times a year, on holidays and special occasions. "Are you doing well? Is it cold there tonight?" They were all letters I could never bring myself to mail. I worried the words would feel like a burden, so I had kept them tucked away in a drawer. I laid them out on my lap, one by one, and began to read them again. My own voice from the past seemed to be asking questions of the me of today. And without realizing it, tears began to trace paths down my cheeks. But it's all right now. Holding on to the feelings of the past and stepping forward into the future are two different things. I gently placed the first letter into the small wood-burning stove in the corner of the room. Gradually, the words were consumed by the flames, curling into black ash and dancing up into the air. "Goodbye to the me I used to be. Thank you for all the wishes." I whispered these words as I sent each one off carefully, one by one. It felt like a sacred ritual. Outside the window, a spring breeze seemed to be carrying the future in from somewhere far away. I folded my hands together and prayed for the safety of that tiny life. If this child is born, perhaps I can become someone's family once more. And this time, it would be a relationship built not on being taken from, but on giving. That night, I made a decision and began to act. I went to the post office and bought a book of forever stamps and picked up a small pack of stationery. And I wrote just one short line. Hello there. It seems I might get to be a grandmother soon. I want to tell you stories while I hold you in my arms. I will be waiting quietly for the day we can meet. Without writing my name or a return address, I dropped it in the mailbox. From that day on, I developed a new habit of opening my mailbox every morning. There hasn't been a reply yet, but I have decided to wait. Because there is a bright light in my heart now, after so many dark days, a ray of light has finally broken through. Now, I write my feelings for the day in a small notebook. I brew a cup of warm tea, and as I gaze at that tiny photograph, I let my thoughts wander to my new family. To forgive. It is not an easy thing, but if you refuse to forgive, you can never move forward. So I have decided to respect their decision, their choices. In return, I will continue to do what I can, in my own way, as a mother, and as a grandmother, and that is enough. Perhaps the day will come when I will meet this new life, when we will exchange words. That, perhaps, is the form of rebirth that I have been longing for. Instead of being crushed by anger and sorrow, I chose to reach out a hand toward the possibility of a tiny life, and I resolved to make my voice heard, even from an unseen place. This is the peaceful counterattack that I have chosen. If you, too, have been hurt by someone, have been abandoned, a small seed of hope will surely nurture a new bond. It was 3 weeks after that day that I moved to a small town nestled in the Berkshires. I left the city quietly, without telling a soul. My moving boxes were few, just 3 small cardboard boxes and a single old suitcase. The scarcity of my possessions made my heart feel lighter, almost free. The place I chose was a small tea house, converted from an old farmhouse. I decided to name it The Story House. Next to the nameplate, I took up a brush myself and added the words, "A tea room for sharing memories." Long ago, when I stood at the front of a classroom, I would tell my students about American history, about the small events happening all around us. I wanted a place where I could tell those stories to someone once again. My grand opening wasn't anything fancy. I didn't even put up a sign. I just pinned a single small piece of paper to the community bulletin board in the town square. On Saturday afternoons, I will tell old stories to children, free of charge. That was the only announcement I made. And yet, on that first Saturday, to my surprise, 3 elementary school children came. One was the son of the man who ran the stationery shop downtown. Another was the daughter of a family with a nearby farm. And the last was a quiet little boy who said he had gotten lost and just happened to wander in. "Today, shall we talk about the story of Johnny Appleseed?" I began. And, recalling a passage from an old textbook, I started to speak slowly. At first, the 3 of them fidgeted in their seats, but gradually their eyes began to sparkle, and every now and then they would listen with their mouths agape in wonder. That evening, for the first time in a long time, I felt a warmth spread through my heart. The joy of sharing something with someone. It felt like it was slowly filling the empty spaces that had been inside of me. A little while later, the small local newspaper ran a story about my tea house. The headline read, "Mother rejected by son, yet continues to share her memories." The article was written with care, telling of my many years as a teacher, and how I was now telling stories of history to the local children for free. It ended with this line, "There are some things a person can only see through loss. She is trying to reclaim them, one story at a time." And then, on the weekend afternoon after that article was published, I found a familiar-looking paper bag sitting on my front step. Inside was a tin of smoky Earl Grey, the tea I used to love to drink, and a small card was tucked beside it. I haven't forgotten, but I still don't have the courage to get any closer. Please take care of yourself. P.S. We're thinking of naming him Ken. There was no sender's name written on it. but I knew the handwriting the moment I saw it. It was him. It was Michael. After I finished reading the note, I gently closed my eyes and gave a small nod. You don't have to come. But if, inside of him, I am still alive, then that is more than enough for me. I carefully brewed a pot of tea, and placing the steaming mug on the windowsill, I continue to tell my stories today. To new children, I speak of the things I once believed in, and the things I wished to protect, even as I was losing them. Perhaps this is my final duty as a mother. Since that day, I have been living quietly, here in a small corner of a little town in the Berkshires. Every Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood children gather here at the Story House. I tell them American folk tales, or fragments of history I heard from my own grandparents who lived through the Great Depression, and I tell these stories with a little bit of care and a lot of quiet. I don't charge any money. I don't speak like I'm reading from a textbook. I simply hand out a cup of steaming tea to each of them and begin slowly with the words, "A long time ago." Why did I start doing this? I think it's because I wanted to pass on to some other child something I couldn't pass on to my own son. Perhaps I made a mistake in how I raised him. The reason my son forgot the ties that are deeper than blood, the reason he began to push his mother's voice away, was surely because I didn't tell him the things I should have told him, when I should have told them. And that is precisely why I want to tell these children, while there is still time, the importance of family, the connection of life, and a heart that knows how to say thank you. These are not things that can be drilled into someone. I believe they must be left behind in the form of a story. If, one day, when these children are grown and they think of their own parents, they happen to remember even one of these tales, I believe it will become a bond that was not broken. The reason I tell stories here is my prayer that someone in the future will not become a person who abandons their mother. On a warm spring day at the end of story time at the Story House, one of the elementary school students asked me a question. "Grandma, if your son came and said he was sorry, would you forgive him?" I smiled a little and answered in a gentle voice, "Of course I would. Everyone makes mistakes." Forgiveness, I think, is a gift that a mother, because she is still living, can give. Like, were to come back, I would put a pot of chicken noodle soup on the stove, and just like that day, long ago, I would say, in a perfectly ordinary voice, "Welcome home." The children stared at me intently, then nodded, looking a little shy. What I thought of quietly in my own heart was this: I no longer need a big house or expensive furniture. All I need is just one thing: for someone to listen to my story just one last time, and listen with all their heart. A warm meal, eaten together, that alone can melt away long years of loneliness and pain, even if just for a moment. And so, as I gaze at the carrots and noodles floating in the soup, I hold the stories I have passed down since I was a child close to my heart, and I continue to pass them on quietly today. The reason I can stand here now is because of what I lost in the past, and because of the new, small connections I have found. Receiving the name Ken was a small sign that a lost bond might, just might, be reconnected. It was nothing more and nothing less than that. But that sliver of light, it certainly rekindled in my chest the joy of living, as a mother, and as a person, once again. As the children were leaving, I told them softly, "From now on, whenever someone comes here, I will brew them a cup of tea, and I will tell them any story they wish to hear, whether it's an old folk tale, a piece of history, or a story about life and the bonds between a parent and child. Because, as a mother and as a storyteller, I want someone to hear my voice once more." The children nodded with bright, full smiles. And in that moment, I understood. Even if I no longer have a house, as long as I can be a home in someone's heart, I can continue to tell my stories forever. This story closes its curtain here, but my life, it will continue on a journey that is richer, quieter, and focused on mending the connections of the heart. The fact that someone is waiting for my story is the smallest, yet most certain, treasure of all. And so, I am still here today, to tell stories and to light a small lamp in the hearts of others. Have you ever considered it? A mother? Who sells the home she spent her entire life building, all to give her only son a step forward into the future that such love could one day be met with being treated as a stranger. I never doubted it for a second. The day my child would look back and say, "Mom, thank you." But the reality was having a bank passbook thrown onto a gas stove and being told, "You're not part of this family anymore." Have you ever seen an elderly mother quietly cleaning the kitchen, setting the table, and returning to her room without uttering a single word? She is not angry, nor is she sad. It is simply the silence of a person who has decided to stop expecting anything at all. If, right now, you have words you have yet to say to your mother, please, I ask you to write this in the comments below. Mom, your place is right here, next to me. That is all it takes. I am now in a small tea house in a small town, passing on old tales and stories of history to children. I am not trying to teach them. I am just gently infusing the scent of the tea with feelings I do not want them to forget. The importance of family, the feeling of gratitude, the fact that someone has lived their life for you. I may no longer be able to teach my son, but to the next generation, I want to convey that someone's mother, someone's grandmother, truly existed. Finally, to all of you, if this story has stayed with you, even just a little, please press the like button. It may just reach someone's memory. And if you thought, I want someone else to hear this story, I would be so grateful if you would share it. And most of all, please follow this channel. Here, we will continue to bring you the stories that have not yet been told, but must not be forgotten. I hope this can be a place you can come to listen, on a day when you feel you want to be a little kinder to someone. Please, before it's too late. Thank you for listening. I will see you again in the next story.